Thank you all for coming to this affiliated session of the Earth Summit, and what a blessing to be here together with our courageous panelists for this very important conversation. I'm Bridget Millman from the National Endowment for Democracy. The NED is committed to pluralist democratic values and have had long-standing support for partners in Ukraine and in Russia. It's a privilege to gather here today with a number of important voices to share insights on the current context and the use of religion in order to justify a war. It's a privilege to introduce Sarah Makin, our moderator. Sarah served as Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Senior Director on the National Security Council, and was the President's Senior Advisor on International Religious Freedom. She also served Vice President Mike Pence for many years as Director of Strategic Engagement and External Affairs. But perhaps most relevantly to the panel, Sarah has advocated on behalf of persecuted religious minorities around the world, and most recently co-produced the documentary A Faith Under Siege, which has exposed Russia's brutal crackdown on faith in occupied Ukraine. Sarah, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridget. I just want to apologize ahead. I have had a cold for about a week, so I apologize if I'm clearing my throat, blowing my nose. I hope you'll excuse me. I just want to thank first the great team at NED for organizing this, for bringing together this incredible panel. There's a lot we're going to discuss today, incredibly important. Today we will be examining how the Kremlin uses the Russian Orthodox Church to legitimize its war against Ukraine, undermine Ukrainian identity, and suppress dissent. This impressive panel is courageous. Speakers both here from Russia and Ukraine, religious leaders, human rights advocates, academic experts, and they will share firsthand experience and frontline insights. And we'll have the first ever discussion in DC of some newly published reports on repression and religious persecution in Russia and in occupied territories. These speakers will provide to you today some historical and political context and that will reflect on the implications for accountability and for religious freedom advocacy. I would like to introduce them and give you their brief bios. So we'll start first here with Sergei Chapnin, Russian journalist, religious studies scholar, editor, and director of communications at Fordham University's Orthodox Christian Studies Center. Sergei spent nearly 15 years within the structures of the Moscow Patriarchate, serving as editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Moscow Patriarchate and the Church Herald newspaper, before being dismissed in 2015 due to his critical stance toward the church's increased alignment with state authoritarianism. I will say, having been dismissed from a job before, it's a badge of honor. And this one for sure.
I was one of the first dismissed by Patriarch Kirill directly.
Well, you deserve applause for that. In response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and his vocal opposition to the war, Chapnin left Russia and relocated to the United States to continue his work free from political and ecclesiastical constraints. Sorry, I need to move my notes. There we go. He is a recognized voice on religious resistance in times of political repression. Sergei, thank you for being here. Reverend Father Andrey Kordochkin. Did I do it? Okay. A Russian Orthodox priest, theologian, and outspoken advocate for peace and human dignity. Educated at universities of Oxford, London, and Durham, ordained in 2002, and for 2 decades led a Russian Orthodox parish in Madrid and served as the diocesan secretary in Spain and Portugal. He has co-authored an open letter in 2022, signed by nearly 300 Russian Orthodox priests and deacons, condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Father Kordochkin was ecclesiastically sanctioned and suspended from the Moscow Patriarchate of the Russian Orthodox Church, currently serving as a parish priest in the Netherlands under the auspices of the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Constantinople. Thank you for being here, Father. Dr. Vera Yastrebova. Yes, yeah, close enough, maybe? Am I okay? Thank you for being here, Vera. Director of Eastern Human Rights Group, a human rights organization founded by democracy activists from Eastern Ukraine, displaced by Russia's aggression against Ukraine in 2014. Her organization documents grave international crimes by Russia in Ukraine, supports domestic investigations, prepares policy briefs on occupied regions, and provides legal counseling to war-affected civilians. Dr. Yastrebova is a prominent human rights lawyer, recognized for her deep expertise in human rights protection, public policy, and parliamentary advocacy in Ukraine. She has held high-level legal and advisory positions across key state institutions, including the Parliamentary Committee on Human Rights and the Office of the Parliamentarian. Make sure I didn't skip somebody here. Okay. Thank you for being with us, Vera. Reverend Mihailo Britson, Director of the Religious Freedom Initiative at Mission Eurasia, and pastor of Grace Evangelical Baptist Church in now-occupied Melitopol, Ukraine. He began his journey of faith in the 1980s, attending secret house churches when Ukraine was under communist rule. He's educated at St. Petersburg Christian University and TCMI Seminary in Austria. During the Russian occupation, Reverend Britson was detained by Russian forces during a worship service, held in custody, and later deported to government-controlled territory of Ukraine. Today, Reverend Britson conducts research, monitoring, and advocacy on religious freedom across the Eurasian region. He provides expert support on interfaith dialogue and church-state relations, participates in international forums, including those convened by OSCE, the International Religious Freedom Community, the Council of Europe, and other institutions. He has a master's degree in theology, teaches at several theological institutions, and we're grateful to have you today, Reverend. And I would like to highlight for those of you who have not yet seen A Faith Under Siege, he is a key role in that film and wonderful on screen as well as he is at the pulpit. So I encourage you all to watch that and see him there. Dr. Dmytro Koval, there you are, co-director of Truth Hounds, a leading Ukrainian human rights organization documenting and investigating Russia's grave international crimes in Ukraine. Truth Hounds has documented more than 17,000 incidents indicative of war crimes, identified over 500 suspects, and received major international recognition, including the 2023 Sakharov Freedom Award and the 2023 Albee Award for Justice for Survivors. Dr. Koval serves as the International Advisory Council of the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine and was a Fulbright Scholar at Stanford University. So not a dummy, pretty smart. Dr. Koval brings extensive experience in international humanitarian and human rights law with professional experience across West and Central Asia, China, and Ukraine, advising governments, legislatures, and international and regional organizations. Thank you for being here. Father Cyril, Reverend Dr. Cyril Hovorun, originally from Ukraine, where he began his studies in theoretical physics. Hey, me too. Yeah. Before moving to the study of theology. Educated at Theological Academy in Kyiv, National University of Athens, and Durham University.
At the same time with him.
Oh, same time. Did you know each other in school?
Yes.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Together in the same house, actually.
I'm going to add a question about that. I'd like to know what your parties were like. Renowned Orthodox theologian and scholar under the jurisdiction of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, professor of ecclesiology, international relations, and ecumenism. I'm not going to say that properly. Yep. At St. Ignatius College in Stockholm, and a director of the Huffington Ecumenical Institute at Loyola Maryland University in Los Angeles. Hovorun was a chairman of the Department for External Church Relations of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, first deputy chairman of the Educational Committee of the Russian Orthodox Church. He has held fellowships at Yale and Columbia and the University of Alberta in Canada. He's a visiting professor at the University of Munster in Germany and at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. Thank you for being here, Father Cyril. Dr. Elizabeth Prodromou, professor of the Practice in the International Studies program at Boston College and non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. She has taught at Princeton, Boston University, and Tufts. Her research interests and policy work focus on the intersection of geopolitics, religion, and human rights, with particular focus on the Eastern Mediterranean and Middle East. She previously served as vice chair and commissioner on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom from 2004 to 2012, and was a member of the U.S. Secretary of State's Religion and Foreign Policy Working Group for 4 years. She was a consultant member of the delegation of the Ecumenical Patriarchate at the Holy and Great Council of Crete in 2016, one of the 5 women at the council. She's delivered expert testimony and briefings to policy-making bodies such as the U.S. Helsinki Commission, the European Parliament, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and NATO. So when I said that we have an extraordinary panel, I was not being facetious. This makes me want to have 4 more lives where I can go to school and learn all the things, and I still couldn't come close to what you all have done. So thank you for taking the time to be here for this very important conversation. I want to be clear before we begin that when we talk today about the Russian Orthodox Church, we are referring to the official hierarchy. We are not referring to the faith, not the collective body of believers or those who call that their church. Our use of Russian Orthodox Church refers to the official administrative structure. So I just wanted that to be clear up front. We have a bunch of time here, and so I hope you'll all speak openly and share what you'd like. If you're going too long, I'll cut you off. But we'd like to start by setting the context here, the relationship between the Kremlin and the Russian Orthodox Church, essentially how the Kremlin uses the church. I'd like to direct this first 2 questions. First to Sergei. You have identified a division in the Russian Orthodox Church between the official church and the grassroots Christian communities, parishes, faith-based organizations, noting that the first is a beneficiary of close cooperation with the Russian state, both financially and politically, and the second group is silenced. You have a recent report on religious persecution in Russia. Is it at their chairs, or?
No, just a few copies.
Okay, we'll let them know where they can find it, yeah? Okay. It documents a systematic campaign of repression against faith leaders inside of Russia who speak out against the war and criticize official Kremlin policy. Can you elaborate on the political dynamics of the relationship between the Kremlin and the Russian Orthodox Church and the relation between state repression and the systematic campaign of religious persecution?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Well, I'll try to be short. You know, when we're speaking about our established churches with our centuries of history, we have to go back not just a few months or a few years, or let me start a few decades of mid-20th century when our Kremlin, for the first time, Stalin, in 1943, legalized partly Russian Orthodox Church, in fact re-established it, and a lot of our clergy, believers, lay people, our monks were persecuted in Gulag, and a small fraction of the Russian Orthodox Church was legalized by our Soviet Union, by the atheistic regime. So the church by 1970s, 80s felt the next generation of those who were the leadership of the Russian Orthodox Church. They felt really comfortable within the Soviet Union. They enjoyed really high position comparable, like bishops comparable to the regional party leaders. And it was a real tragedy for them when the Soviet Union collapsed. And both KGB at that time and our party institutions, commissions, lost any interest in our cooperation with the church. So that was the real chance for the church to be democratic or soborna, as we say it in kind of theological terms, conciliar. And that ended up almost within less than 10 years by the end of 1990s, when the hierarchy managed to re-establish its contacts with Kremlin, with the new Russian leadership, That was the end of Yeltsin's epoch and the very beginning of Putin's epoch. What happened then? The state actually decided to rely on kind of building new Russian identity, to rely on the Orthodox Church. And that was the beginning of the problem. So what happened then? Patriarch Alexis II died in 2008, and Patriarch and Kirill was elected as Patriarch, and he celebrated actually 2 days ago, February 1st, his 17th year as Patriarch of Russia. He managed to sort of sell the Kremlin, Patriarch Kirill managed to sell the Kremlin two concepts. And that's actually very important for understanding the kind of further dynamics. The first concept was the concept of Ruski Mir. And at that time, that wasn't an imperial ideology, it was more like a soft power. But then it was transformed into imperial militaristic ideology. And the second concept was the second of traditional values. Surprisingly, if you will check our whatever literature, kind of pastoral, theological, political science, you won't see any mention of traditional values in Russian discourse in 1990s. The first to use this term was, at that time, Metropolitan Kirill Gundyaev. And no one took him seriously. Literally, I remember this time. We were really surprised why he is kind of pushing this traditional values or agenda. But he was patient enough. He waited for another 10 years. And at the beginning of the third term, Putin's third term as president, this concept popped up. And Kremlin was very thankful to the church, to the official church, for introducing this concept. And that led to our, when I said kind of the church sold this concept, of course, in inverted commas, but partly, because the church really benefited from that political move. Now, what happened then? Back 10 years ago, in 2015, when Russia celebrated the 70th or 80th anniversary of the victory in the Second World War, this war was for the first time in the modern Russian history called the Holy War. And that was the beginning. Then this concept of Holy War was projected on the Russian participation in the war in Syria. This war was also called the Holy War. And then I said, well, it's just one step from, and already the war in Donbass was there. That's the end of the 2015. So I said that, look, just one step to calling the war in Donbass holy. And within a week, I was fired by Patriarch Kirill. And later, in 2022, a lot of people reminded me, kind of, we remember your text from 2015. So that happened. So this alliance, yes, I'll be short. This alliance is very strong. The church benefited from this alliance. The state benefited from this alliance. And it is scandal. Look, it's Europe. Russia is a part of Christian world, a part of Christendom. And this alliance actually raised violence against not just the other Christians, Protestants, Catholics, Greek Catholics, but the very same members of the very same church. The very same church. And the church leadership in Russia has no compassion, has no interest, actually, or even kind of saying a good word about its flock in Ukraine. And I think this is a serious, not just political problem, it's a serious spiritual problem on the side of the official Russian Church. They really don't care about anyone or even kind of members of their communities outside the territory of Russia, whether it's Ukraine, Belarus, Baltic states, Western Europe, United States. Russian Church became a national and nationalistic church today, and I think that's contributes to the understanding of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergei. And just quickly, where can people find your recent report?
Yes, it's an updated report, so we publish small circulations every few months. You can kind of leave me your card if you have, or check the Orthodox Christian Studies Center website for the updated report. I think that will be in sometime in March.
Fordham.
At Fordham, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Elizabeth, Dr. Prodromou, you have studied ways in which the Russian state has used the Russian Orthodox Church as a tool of foreign influence efforts in Europe and beyond, noting a focus on Mount Athos as a key part of Russia's efforts to weaponize tradition through framing and shaping culture wars. How has the Kremlin institutionalized traditional values and religious beliefs in its effort to build foreign influence? And what are the objectives of these operations, and what soft and sharp power tools are employed to achieve them?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Sergei, for starting us off. I think for me the key point is that the Kremlin recognizes religion and views religion, and most specifically Orthodox Christianity, as a kind of resource, as a soft power resource that can be combined with sharp power tools in order to build influence. And although many of us probably in this room have talked a lot about soft power, sharp power, I think it's important to sort of give a little bit of a timeline. But most recently, in January 2023, Putin signed an executive decree updating the basics of the state culture policy. And that outlines frameworks for legislation on culture, as well as for national and municipal programs on culture. But what's key about that document is that it's a nation-building project at home. It sees religion and culture as a tool for nation-building at home, but it also is understood as an integral part of the Russian Federation national security strategy, which then has implications for foreign policy, of course, including but not limited to the war in Ukraine. So although we talk a lot about religion, culture, and influence building, I think we sometimes miss the crucial point that the Kremlin's view of geopolitics positions religion and culture and traditional values as part of that, as the fulcrum that links nationalism at home with foreign policy revisionism abroad. And just as that linkage applies to Russia, the Kremlin understands that influence building abroad involves using the traditional values card and the Orthodox card for disrupting national cohesion inside other countries. So that's where, again, they see religion and traditional values as either a form of cohesion or a form of disruption at the domestic level, both inside Russia and in other cases. And that disruption in terms of national cohesion then can have implications for foreign policy choices by other countries. And I think we've seen that happening certainly in the US, and we see it in some EU member states, and in some non-EU member states. We can talk about which ones if we want as we go forward. But the most important point is traditional values and religion are considered a soft power resource for a narrative that is meant to persuade other countries to be like us. And that's the soft power piece, it's persuasion. And so what does be like us mean when it comes to Russia, traditional values, and soft power? There's a civilizational story that links Russian Orthodoxy to Christendom, and thereby positions Moscow as the third Rome, and most importantly to an argument about why Moscow is Rome 3.0. And the building blocks are pretty straightforward, but they're also intersectional. So they rely on this consistent and repetitive message about Rome 1 and 2. So the fall of Rome 1 is due to decadence and weakening in the face of the so-called barbarian invasions, and then the reconsolidation but fragmentation of Western Christendom with the Holy Roman Empire and the Protestant Reformation. The fall of Rome 2.0, Constantinople, due to decadence in Byzantium and the errant efforts at reconciliation with Rome 1.0, and in the form of theological dilution and ecclesiastical subservience. This is the Moscow Patriarchate narrative that led to the geopolitical catastrophe of the Ottoman conquest and half a century of Eastern Christian oppression under Ottoman Islamism. This is the narrative. It's a civilizational narrative that rests on a story about Christendom and positioning Moscow as Rome 3.0. And there are three key features that emerge from this narrative that's on an infinite loop on all sorts of platforms and also in traditional media. Number one, the audiences are multiple. They're both domestic and international, and they're domestic in other countries as well. So their international footprint is also meant to affect what's happening domestically. Number two, history is understood at and used as a live resource for persuading and linking historical events to contemporary sources of threat, real or perceived. And then three, there's this binary of West, anti-West that the Kremlin has adopted that puts Russia in the place of defending against the West. So then traditional values means speaking to diverse communities, not only Christian communities, not only Orthodox communities, but where Moscow becomes then the defender of traditional values that are under siege by what? They're under siege from secularism, Western secularism, that's reduced to being anti-religious. So separation of religion and state and religious freedom initiatives are presented as a Western secularist assault at home, and on things like an assault on family values, traditional gender roles, broader gender issues related to LGBTQ+, and to legislation that is seen as limiting respect for worship. And so if you take the parts of this soft power narrative, decadence, secularism, sometimes Islamist threat, ecumenism, the Kremlin has used these different components to target different audiences that would not necessarily make common cause. And that's where you get, for example, these strange transnational bedfellows appealing to segments of the conservative wings of the Roman Catholic and the Protestant communities in the U.S. and the global South, to conservative factions in the global Muslim world that cut across from Africa to the Middle East to South Asia. And so you see these peculiar bedfellows that all cohere around the notion of traditional values, the Moscow Patriarchate as the new defender of global Christendom against this assault. And in terms of sharp power, most of these are presented, as I said, on digital websites, but they also use traditional media as well. And that goes back to the policy of the Putin regime since Putin assumed power, to actually earlier than that, under Yeltsin, to bring all traditional media under state control, working with private sector interests and oligarchs who would generate enormous profits from this. So both traditional media and digital media are the fora in which these different audiences are targeted, and they are oftentimes Orthodox sites, but they're Orthodox adjacent sites, so other religious communities, and then they have nothing to do with religion per se. And as I said, they're on an infinite loop, and they target individuals and communities as emblematic from Moscow's perspective of who represent this assault on traditional values and inauthentic orthodoxy. There was a recent old-fashioned smear campaign against the Ecumenical Patriarch, Bartholomew, that came out of the Russian intelligence sources and then was recycled on Orthodox and other digital sites. And again, these are used to target particular audiences to message this same historically grounded civilizational narrative that positions what is considered authentic orthodoxy, and for other traditional believers, authentic faith in general, as something being defended by the Moscow Patriarchate.
You mentioned a number of times this revisionist infinite narrative loop, right, that has occurred. Can you just very quickly, anything you can share with us about the amount of money or resources that has been spent by Russia to share that narrative loop, that revisionist narrative loop outside of their own borders?
I think others on the panel can probably address the resources piece, but I do think it's important that to think about what their approach is. Again, combining traditional media with postmodern digital media. The platforms all tend to be multilingual, and so again, they can be recycled in multiple languages, and they work according to a flood the zone principle. So you flood the zone with all of this information that has these common threads running throughout, right? You therefore overwhelm, confuse, create disputation, you win allies, and you paralyze opponents by generating opposition to, in this case, support for Ukraine. And you also ensure that these are recycled repeatedly. And so there are a host of YouTube channels, Telegram channels, well-known blog sites, and other digital platforms. And you mentioned Mount Athos. Mount Athos is fully digitized, so it's religion meeting, the 21st century, the postmodern world. And these things are then recycled there, and they are then disseminated out from Mount Athos by virtue of the many pilgrims, Orthodox and non-Orthodox, who go to the Holy Mountain, hear these messages in monasteries that consume this, and then it's reproduced again. So this is a kind of multi-dimensional, multifactorial sort of postmodern warfare that understands, again, soft power as the resource and sharp power as the toolbox.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. By the way, for the NED team, if I forgot my phone up here, so I am not sure of time. That would be awesome. Or I'll just use I want to make sure we're staying on time here. I'd like to pivot and talk a little bit about how the Kremlin uses the church to legitimize the war in Ukraine, against Ukraine, and the implications for clergy, such as yourselves, fathers, and for other faithful. Sorry. One day this is going to work the way I want it to. Father Hovorun, you have previously noted that any war has to have guns and ideas, and that in this war, the Kremlin supplied guns, and you, quote, believe the church is providing the ideas. You've also observed that the Russian Orthodox Church has been Putinized, and noted similarities between the militant Russian religious conservatism now and the Soviet anti-religious socialism. The Moscow Patriarchate has referred to the war against Ukraine as a holy war, while the Kremlin has claimed to defend Christian values. And I can say that as an American Christian, it's very confusing when people tell us that. Doesn't seem to match up. In your view, how has Putin's regime used the Russian Orthodox Church to support the ideological foundations of the war? How has the Moscow Patriarchate reinforced support for the Kremlin's policies?
Thank you, Sarah. I'll try to be as brief as Sergei Chapnin. Actually, I'll start with this Putinization term. It's linguistic. Let's start with linguistics. Actually, I've coined a word in Greek, imagine, how to deal with this. I coined this word as apoputinopoiesis. Imagine, well, it's a Greek word. It's not still in the vocabulary, of the Greek words. It means deputinization, literally. That's what the Russian Orthodox Church needs. This word, apoputinopoiesis, could be in the future Greek vocabulary kind of dictionary, together with another word like removing fuses, diffusion, as it were, of explosives. You mentioned, Sarah, that you have the same background in nuclear physics, in theoretical physics, so we know how the nukes work. Basically, it doesn't matter how much like uranium or plutonium you put into the shell. You can stock the shell with as much plutonium as you want, but it would not explode anyways. You need a fuse for this mass of explosives to actually explode. And the size of the fuse is not big. It's not as big as the bomb itself. It's approximately the same size, could be the same size as in a mine, so to say. So it's not a big thing. But without this fuse, it would not explode. For me, it's an image that describes how this synergy, this cooperation between the church and the state and the Kremlin works in Russia, and how it works to wage wars like the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is just like a mine or a nuke. So it has explosives inside, which is the Russian military machine, basically, and then it has a fuse, which is the ideas, which is the ideology. And the main factory that assembles fuse for this bomb is called the Moscow Patriarchate, the Russian Orthodox Church. That is the kind of the brand of the factories there. These ideas that have been assembled at that factory, they are not actually something unique. There is no special know-how. They have been copied, from other ideas. Not a single Russian ideology or idea is uniquely Russian. All of them have been borrowed from somewhere else. But in Russia, those ideas have a magic of leading to disasters, unprecedented disasters. Like take the ideas of socialism, for example, Marxism. In some countries, they worked without much harm. Sometimes even beneficial, like Nordic countries, for example. In Russia, the same ideas led to the explosion of cosmic scale in the Soviet ideology, in communism. Russian communism is not just any communism. It's really like a nuke or thermonuclear, bomb. Huge damage. Even though the ideas are very similar. The same is with the ideas of the Russian world ideology. Some people say, look, they are not very much different from, nationalism or imperialism that we had in other countries, in other contexts. How much is it different from, other similar ideologies in the past or in the present, elsewhere in the world? The difference is exactly what kind of bomb and what kind of explosive you put it in, even though it is the same fuse. Okay? So in the Russian situation, we have a very kind of syncretic, very postmodern sort of construct, ideological construct, that combines many elements from different parts of the world, different ideological systems. Some of them are Marxist still. Some of them are anti-Marxist. It's really a postmodern construct where you find together, say, Tsar Nicholas II or John the Terrible rubbing their shoulder together with Joseph Stalin. In their real life, they would kill each other. They would not kind of stand to each other miles. In the Russian ideology, they stand next to each other. Their faces blend together as if they were the same person. And it reminds the person of Vladimir Putin, of course. So it's a postmodern construct. Assembled from different parts of the world, just like what the Russians do with the drones and missiles that they send to Ukraine. They put pieces, chips, and elements from different manufacturers in the West or in the East, and they assemble them into the deadly missiles that destroy the cities in Ukraine. It's like the parallel with the ideas, the sort of ideas that they produce. So we should not be misled by the idea, by this kind of discovery that those ideas are not very much different from the ideas elsewhere in the world. What matters is the combination of those ideas with the traditions of Russian cruelty and the traditions of Russian military actions. So this is. this kind of manufacturing has become possible as a result of cooperation or synergy between the Kremlin and the Russian Orthodox Church. Then, speaking about the synergy, which is an Orthodox word from the Orthodox vocabulary, synergia, right? Working together, which is also a bit confusing. Many people, myself, I contributed to this kind of misconception, and many people believe that what Patriarch Kirill wants to build in Russia is a kind of symphonia, Byzantine symphony. And they say, what is the difference between the Russian symphony, and say the Byzantine symphony? If Putin wants to build something similar, how much worse he is than the Byzantine emperors in the past? But I think it's a bit of kind of misconception, because yes, we may perceive the actual situation in Russia as a sort of symphonia, but it's not in the head of Kirill. In the head of Kirill is not symphonia, it's theocracy. It's ayatolism. He wants to be an ayatollah. He doesn't want to be Emperor Michael III, whatever, of Byzantium, no. He doesn't want to be any Michael III, of Byzantium, Kerularius, I don't know. But he wants to be an ayatollah, basically. And his image, his vision for the church-state relations in Russia is very closer to Iran than, say, to Byzantium. And actually, the practices of persecution in Russia are very similar to the ones in Iran. I've heard a lot of talks, conversations during these 2 days about China. How bad is the situation in China? Almost like China is the worst that we can imagine. It's not the worst. I've been to China. I've crisscrossed China, like I've taught in more universities in China than in any other country in the world, basically. I've crisscrossed Russia as well. So I think I know the situation within China and within Russia pretty well. I visited some both underground and official communities in China. I know the situation there. I believe so, at least. And I know, and it's my personal experience. I've been also to many other contexts which were discussed in this forum, like in Africa, in Asia, and elsewhere. My personal experience is what I've seen in Russia, what I've seen on the occupied territories. It's much worse than what we have in China. It's rather closer to what we guess what is happening in Iran. So this is the kind of, it's not really synergy, it's not really symphonia, it's really ayatolism, it's really an attempt to build theocracy, and we should be aware of this.
That's a wonderful point, and I think one certainly that the majority of the American public does not see or does not know. I would argue that the majority would not see them as nearly as totalitarian in that way. And so thank you for making that point. And that was a great metaphor as well about the fuse. Father Kordochkin, you've been an outspoken critic of the Moscow Patriarchate's support for the invasion of Ukraine, a stance that triggered rebuke from Patriarch Kirill and led to your expulsion from the parish that you led in Spain. You have noted that the Moscow Patriarchate has become a repressive body for its own anti-war clergy. Can you talk to us some about the consequences for Russian Orthodox clergy who speak out against the war? And what are the implications for the anti-war faithful in Russia today who seek to continue the ministry inside the country?
Well, within this theocracy that Father Cyril has been speaking about, these priests have faced repressions both by the church and by the institutional church and by the state. To be fair, one has to say that the repressions upon those priests who did not belong to the Moscow Patriarchate, who belonged to alternative jurisdictions and therefore were not valid priests for the Russian states, were harder. So we had some cases like, for example, Father Ian Kormayarov, who was imprisoned for 3 years because he was analyzing various sayings of Vladimir Putin, that he is actually closer in his mindset to an Islamic suicide bomber than to being an Orthodox Christian. And then, for example, now another priest from an alternative jurisdiction is under trial because he expressed sympathy publicly towards the Russians who are fighting on the Ukrainian side. Or, for example, some of the Moscow Patriarchate priests have also had sanctions. For example, last year, one of them was arrested and he was put into prison for 2 weeks because in his social media, in 2014, 11 years ago, they have found a photograph where he stands on Nevsky Prospect, in my home city, with a little Ukrainian flag. So you can just imagine the state functionary who is scrolling his timeline on the social media 11 years back to see what he has there. But of course, these priests also have faced ecclesiastical repressions, being many of them being defrocked. And in most cases, the formal accusation was their refusal to read the so-called prayer for the Holy Rus. Now, if you may ask, what's the difficulty? Why can't a priest pray for Holy Rus? If you look at the text of this prayer, which was introduced in September 2022, you can see that liturgically it has a form of a prayer, but in fact it's a political declaration because it has few affirmations. One of them is that it speaks about the one nation of the Holy Rus, so it implicitly denies the existence of a Ukrainian nation, corresponding to the article written or probably signed by Vladimir Putin a year before the invasion. Then this prayer also represents Russia not as an aggressor but as a victim of some hostile forces that want to destroy it in the kind of conspiracy kind of mindset. And most importantly, it speaks about victory and not about reconciliation. So we had a very curious case of a priest in Moscow who was reading this prayer because he was obliged to, but he changed one word. The word victory he changed for the word peace. And he was defrocked. Now, a spokesman for the Moscow Patriarchate, Vladimir Legoida, when he was asked by a journalist whether these punishments upon those priests are not too cruel, he said, well, the church is like the army. If people in the army, they give oath, and if they do something that goes contrary to it, they have to pay the price. So, and the priests and the deacons, before they're being ordained, they also give this oath. So the patriarchate itself is describing itself in a kind of paramilitary terms. And recently we heard Patriarch Cyril on his interview dedicated to the Nativity of Christ, where he was saying that those people who are questioning the national consensus in Russia should be treated as betrayers of motherland. Now, betrayer of motherland is not a moral term, it's a legal term, because it's a criminal article which implies punishment up to death sentence. So you can see this repressive symphony on both on sides of both the church institution and the state.
Thank you, Father. I will keep the question about your college life together and what that was like until the very end. I want to just let everybody know on time. It is 4:24, so I think we're okay, but I have a lot more here I'd like you to cover. So, Dr. Ystrevova, your new report notes until 2014, Ukraine had one of the most diverse religious contexts in Eastern Europe with Orthodox, Greek, and Roman Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, and Muslim communities. After Russia's invasion and occupation in 2014, the report documents the destruction of churches, persecution of clergy, and militarization of children, noting that Russia has used religion as an instrument of ideological integration in Crimea and the Donbass. Can you elaborate on your findings on how this plays out in practice in the occupied territories?
Дякую за можливість виступити.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here.
Так сталося, що війна прийшла до мене в домівку в моє рідне місто Дебальцево Донецької області у 2014 році.
It so happened that war came to my life back in 2014 in the city of Debaltsevo in Donbass, where I lived then.
Я є внутрішньо переміщеною особою.
So I am an internally displaced person.
І разом з колегами ми вирішили зробити звіт на цю тему. Дякую за підтримку НЕДу, тому що завдяки цьому стала ця робота можлива.
Together with my colleagues, we started to make this study, and owing to NED support, without them we wouldn't be able to do it.
Є на першому ряду, та ось у мене в руках QR-код, за яким є посилання на звіт.
Our copies of our report are available on some of the chairs, and you can take picture of this QR code and see it too.
Ми з колегами проаналізували, що сталося з часу окупації в сфері релігійних прав на тимчасово окупованих територіях України.
We have analyzed the changes in religious freedom that took place in the occupied territories since Russian troops came.
Ми прийшли до висновків, що після окупації частини Донецької, Луганської областей, Запорізької, Херсонської та Криму,
So we came to the conclusion that after Russian forces occupied Donetsk, Luhansk Oblast, as well as parts of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson and the Crimea,
Російська Федерація під виглядом регулювання релігійної діяльності впровадила механізми тотального контролю.
Russian Federation implemented mechanisms of total control, which were under cover-up of registration of religious activities.
Путінський режим знищував ту свободу релігійних сповідань, яка існувала в Україні до окупації на цих територіях.
Putin's regime was destroying the religious freedoms that existed there before they came.
Релігійні громади змушували проходити примусову перереєстрацію, надавати персональні дані вірян, звітувати про фінансову діяльність тощо.
Every religious community was required to provide personal information of their faithful and report on their financial activities, etc.
Путінський режим з 2014 по 2020 роки фактично те, що задокументовано нами як правозахисною організацією, ми знайшли підтвердження більше ніж 600 випадків руйнування культурних споруд.
We studied and recorded more than 600 instances of destruction of cultural objects of culture by Putin's regime in the period from 1918 to 1920. Excuse me, 2018 to 2020.
Біля 60 храмів повністю знищені.
Close to 60 temples were totally destroyed.
Але на цьому це не головне варварство. Я можу сказати, що більше ніж 70 вбитих священнослужителів віддали своє життя, тому що не підкорились режиму окупантів.
And that was not the worst barbarism they committed, because close to 70 clergy members were killed, gave away their lives because they refused to subjugate them, to accept, be obedient to this occupation regime.
Російські тортури застосовуються не тільки до релігійних, також і до релігійних громад, не тільки до священнослужителів, навіть до вірян.
Not only clergy members, but even members of church communities, the faithful, are subjected to torture.
Біля 70 тисяч осіб зазнали різних форм релігійних переслідувань.
Close to 70,000 individuals became victims of various forms of religious persecution.
І це не тільки незаконні затримання, це і побиття, і катування, і погрози.
These includes unlawful detention and beatings and intimidation and threats.
Але це не суха статистика. Треба розуміти, що за тими фактами, які я озвучила вам, стоять життя, долі і вибір людей, яким просто не пощастило, як мені.
And these are not just numbers. Behind each of these numbers of statistics, there are fates of individuals, people who just had misfortune in life like myself.
І я дуже коротко наприкінці хочу зазначити, що саме, на мій погляд, є важливим в фокусі саме церкви під контролем Путіна.
I want to conclude by emphasizing what's really important in this focus on churches that are under control of Putin.
Зараз фактично на базі РПЦ МП здійснюється мілітаризація дітей шляхом впровадження різноманітних спеціальних програм.
Russian Orthodox Church becomes a tool of militarizing the young generation by implementing various upbringing programs.
Це православні вітязі проєкт і різноманітні військово-патріотичні клуби.
Various paramilitary clubs, one is called camps, etc. One is called Orthodox Warriors and more.
І, на жаль, там разом з передачею навиків володіння зі зброєю дітям вкладають ідеологію ненависті, нелюбові і ворожнечі.
In those camps and programs, children are trained to use firearms and also are indoctrinated in ideologies of hatred, hatred and violence.
І це має вкрай важкі, прогнозовано важкі наслідки на майбутнє, і ми з цим повинні це враховувати, прагнучи відновлення і територіальної цілісності, і свободи і прав вірян на всій території суверенної України.
Understandably, this is going to have very heavy, grave consequences for the future that we must take into account as we focus our attention on reunification of Ukraine's territories and working towards better freedoms for all people of faith.
Щиро сподіваюся, що вдалося відповісти на ваше запитання.
I hope I have given an adequate answer to your question.
You certainly have. Dr. Yastrebova, thank you for the important work you've done in documenting this horrific destruction of churches, families, the militarization of children. That is a piece in the United States that we are hoping to build more awareness around. So thank you for your important work. And thank you for the NED for supporting that important work. Reverend Britson, you have a personal experience leading a congregation under direct threat, including the forced closure of your church, interrogation by occupying forces, and the subsequent exile with your family. Mission Eurasia has just released 2 reports, Faith in the Crossfire and Continued War Against Faith, which documents religious repression in Russia and the occupied territories of Ukraine. In these reports, you note that religious repression is not an unexpected byproduct of authoritarianism, but a central mechanism of state control. We talked about that a number of times during the summit today and yesterday. What are the implications for religious minorities seeking to worship freely in Russia and in the occupied territories? And how do restrictive legal frameworks provide a foundation for religious persecution in Russia and the occupied territories?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say why should you listen Ukrainian about Russia? I was ordained in 1992, and for 30 years we've been enjoying the freedom in Ukraine. We used our historical building, which was built in 1914 and then taken by Stalin's regime in 1936. So we restored church in the said historical place. And during these 30 years, we were really prosper because of this kind of laws, the kind of situation there. In 2022, our city was occupied by Russian troops, and everything changed. We tried to live just ordinary religious life, but it wasn't possible. So in 6 months, we get to crisis because we couldn't live there, and Russians couldn't be patient to us because we did everything like Ukrainian way. So September 11th, very remarkable day. September 11th, the troops burst out to our worship service, like here. They blocked people and fingerprint everybody. They arrested me, searched my house. After all interrogation, they just cast out from that territory. And I joined to Mission Eurasia in order to help people because Mission Eurasia has a Department of Religious Freedom for long here. We're working with countries of former Soviet Union, so we mostly make reports about Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, or Kyrgyzstan. Now Ukraine became the very point here, and we made some reports. Like Faith Under Fire, Faith in Chains, we compare occupied territory with Belarus. and we understand that Russia already canonically occupied Belarus. We make another report, Face Under Russia Terror, and we explain what happened in later year there, how they started so-called re-registration churches. Then we make this report, Continued War Against Faith, this 2026. And then we think, why it happened at all? What's the pattern of this religious? What the source of this religious? So last year we spent a lot of time to making this report, Faith Under Crossfire. And we explore situation in Russia. And as we told here, we understood how this idea of Russian world became from cultural things just to expansive, just to egoistic, just heretical idea, and so aggressive idea, how this virus became so dangerous. And in our research, actually it's 140 pages research, we explore different stages. For instance, how they change this legislative framework, like for Popravka Lazovova and then Yarovaya Endowment, and then they restrict internet, how it helps to prioritize Orthodox Church and just push everybody down. We see how they use Protestant unions, how they force them just to be like that. And I'm 59, I remember Soviet Union very well. And I know how it's possible to be church under full control. So we understood how they pressed leaders and just believers. You ask how much money they spend. I don't know how much money they spend. I know how much money they collect. 2, 3, 4 millions by fines just because somebody used literature without stamp approved, or plague you don't have your name of your church, or you invite people to your home, read Bible and pray there. We always, we understood that they goes from just fine, like administrative work. They then go to huge, tremendous mass media attack to a person. Then they call it person foreigner agent. And by the way, we have some foreigner agent here, from their country. And then they open crimes and put people in jail, like with Nikolai Romanyuk and others. You can find a lot of. And then we see how they work like circle and why it happened in our territory. When they occupied Crimea and Donbass in 2014, they used this pressure there. And while worldwide society doesn't tell it, they were concerned. They were really concerned. They were tremendously concerned, but didn't do anything. Russia brought this persecution to their territory. Because they forbid Jehovah's Witnesses 2017. Then New Generation, then Возрождение movement. So then they go to my city, killing people. Dr. Yasrebova say about killing people. We have our own investigation. This is books of remembers. This is killed people, killed ministers, priests, all of them. Killed, it's fully civilian. It's not those who want to military service. It's not chaplains. It's special database. Those people were killed in occupied territory, in front line, and even in control, Ukrainian controlled territory, like people in Chernobyl, just because of Russian missile. We understood that it's pattern. It's not all what we expected, all what we lived through. It's not kind of glitch of system. No, it's the system.
On purpose. It's on purpose.
And they do it again, and now they go to their territory, repressing unregistered churches. Mm-hmm. And I want to see a couple pictures here. This is my church before the war. Russian took our building, they cut cross, and now it's club. We used to have Christmas celebration on that territory. this is our Christmas celebration. Now they use this stage for яблочко dancing. So we experience the tremendous pattern of persecution, and what the most danger that they export it, because it's pretty attractive for all dictatorship to take this. Nothing happened. You can do whatever you do. And now Kazakhstan already forbid Jehovah's Witnesses, Kyrgyzstan already. So all Soviet Union Republic took the same pattern. So because of that we are here, and I say you need to pay attention to these viruses, because it's very dangerous not only for our territory. It's not for Ukraine. It's not for occupied territory. Through all the world. And if we are democracy society, we need to pay attention, because religious fights for faith. And it's really, it's not the system fights with the religion. No, it's something new. It's something different, and we need to pay close attention to that.
Thank you, Reverend Breton. Dmitry Koval. Truthons has been documenting and investigating gross human rights violations since the first phase of occupation in 2014. Looking back on the first wave of aggression that began in Crimea in 2014, how would you assess both the evolution of religious freedom violations and the effectiveness of existing accountability mechanisms?
Thank you, Sarah, for the question, and of course thank you organizers for setting up this panel and for inviting me. Let me start with saying that it's a challenging task to speak last, including because my esteemed colleagues really reflected of many aspects of the religious persecution on the occupied territory of Ukraine and in Russia in general. You wouldn't believe this, but I have even the reference to Ayatollism and Tehran written in my notes. So yeah, I feel a little bit uncomfortable of talking with you right now, but still I'll try to maybe mention or highlight some of the examples of the persecution, so they connect in your minds with some rather theoretical observations that my colleagues were sharing with you. Let me start probably with saying that the observation of the violations of freedom of religion is very important for understanding the Ukrainian resilience and also strong Ukrainian position regarding the so-called peace talks with Russia. So one of the reasons why Ukraine is so unapologetic regarding any territorial deals, it's because Ukraine is fighting not for territory but for people, and it very much learned from this 10 years experience or 8 years experience of occupation before the full-scale invasion what the occupation actually means for people, including what it means for the freedom of religion. In 2017, United States, and more precisely United States Commission on Religious Freedoms, published a report in which it reflected on the situation with religious freedom in Russia. And what is said in that report is that Russia is one of the few states that is not only organizing repressions in the country, but it's also exporting religious persecution. I think that the report caught this right, but there is an important addition to this finding of the Commission. And this addition would be that Russia is not only exporting persecutions, but it also testing persecutions on the occupied territory to later lay out them on the internationally recognized territory of Russia. So what we are seeing on the occupied territory and what we saw on the occupied territory since 2014 until now, it's in a way a test for the whole country. So it's coming to Russia as well. Now, as promised, a couple of examples that speak about things that my colleagues already mentioned. I would like to start probably with illustration that speaks to the remark made yesterday on one of the panels by Ambassador Brownback. He said that religious freedoms are connected to other rights, and in a way they are in the core, it's the heart of the human rights infrastructure. And we saw this in the very first months, during the very first months of occupation in Donetsk, for instance. In Donetsk, in March 2014, before the armed hostilities started there, 60 denominations organized the prayer for peace on the, it was called Interfaith Prayer Marathon, on the central square of Donetsk. And basically, people were coming there to pray for peace, to pray for understanding, to pray for kind of peaceful resolution of whatever conflict is coming. And that marathon was severely attacked right after Russian forces gained control over Donetsk. I mean, Russian-led or Russian-supported forces. And it ended for the marathon badly. Many of the priests who participated or organized the marathon, they were incarcerated, they were tortured or inhumanly treated. And the whole idea of having someone telling the state what citizens should pray for was undermined by later actions of the forces that controlled the city. Now, an example that I think very well illustrates the decay of moral but also spiritual decay among the Russian, I mean the Moscow Patriarchy priests. So Truth Hounds, my organization, collected several testimonies that speak exactly about that. For instance, Father Volodymyr Koskin talked about his experience in Mariupol. Just a bit of history. Mariupol, as you probably heard about Mariupol because of the occupation that started in May 2022, but Mariupol was also briefly occupied in 2014 from May to June, I think. And during this month and a half of occupation of Mariupol, Volodymyr Koskin says that one of the torture chambers in Mariupol was run by the Moscow Patriarchy priest. So basically, it's not only about kind of supporting in theory, it's actively participating in something like torture. Now another testimony speaks about the behavior of the priest from Novosibirsk who came to the occupied territory and who drank vodka together with Cossacks. And this group, priests and Cossacks, beat detained persons for being not a canonical Orthodox. And they, at least that's how the story goes, they beat him with a cross on the head until the cross broke. So that's, I can't imagine other kind of manifestation of this decay that we all were talking about here. Now, how these persecutions are connected to something that you, Sarah, talk quite often about, and I think that you raised this question yesterday on one of the panels, how the freedom of religion connects with stability, but also one of the synonyms to stability, at least in many contexts, security. So
it was nice to know somebody was listening. Thank you. Yeah.
I was.
Thank you.
So some of the forces that took part in the armed conflict in Ukraine back in 2014 and throughout the years, at least the first years of the occupation of the eastern part of Ukraine and Crimea, had significance and quite nuanced connections with the Orthodox Church. There were, for instance, units called Russian Orthodox Army or Cossacks Army. And Cossacks Army is institutionally connected to Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy. And these units, again, they practically realized this doctrine of Russian world and this new Russian imperialism, this new Russian attempt to rebuild the empire, either Soviet or Russian empire before that. These forces showed us how the church is used and how it will be used in the future to come. So it will be used to mobilize Russian population and the population on the occupied territory to take active part in the war and to give their lives for the causes of Kremlin. And also, what is quite interesting and is what was the language that was used in the Russian Orthodox Army and Cossacks Army. They were talking about crusade, but in their imagination, that crusade had its enemy not only in Ukraine, but also in the West. So basically, the crusade had to continue beyond Ukraine, in Western Europe, but also US was always mentioned. So these examples, I think, very brightly and vibrantly speak about indeed the nature, but also the mechanics of these violations of religious freedoms on the occupied territory. And they also tell us what to expect next, both on the occupied territory and in Russia itself.
Thank you. Can you share your website, Truthhounds?
It's truthhounds.org.
Wonderful. Thank you. This has been incredible. We have 10 minutes. So here's what I think we should do. I think we'd be remiss if we did not give you the opportunity to respond, maybe with so now what? A recommendation. Are there examples of constructive engagement between the West and faith-based institutions that are relevant that we could talk about? Or from a policy perspective, how should the West engage or not engage with the Moscow Patriarchate? So I'd like you to, in the last 10 minutes, if everybody takes a minute and either respond or reflect on a recommendation or a what's next, or if you have your own, just something you would like to close with, please use your moment to do that in the last 10 minutes.
Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the participants. That was really great. Two short observations. First, I think there is a big problem with institutional churches and ecumenical organizations in the West. They kind of shy. They don't want to speak about our religious persecutions on the occupied territories in Russia. And this is because they consider that Russian Orthodox Church is the biggest Orthodox Church in the world, and they have they would like to maintain relations with Moscow Patriarchate, and it's really uncomfortable for them to recognize that there are persecutions now for 4 years, more than 4 years, since at least 2014. And I think we need pressure on them, both from human rights activists and Christian activists within our countries to help them recognize that silence actually works against those who were persecuted, killed, against those who suffer, and all this will continue if there will be no public stand on that from our world Christian community.
Thank you, Sergei. Elizabeth, please.
Yeah, I would say non-engagement is not an option, and everyone here on this panel, this is engagement. So build on those who share the same views and who are willing to take the same risks and can provide the same kind of input in order to engage, so that it's not handing over to the Moscow Patriarchate leadership an entire religious institution that is transnational. And I also think it's really important to recognize the linkages between what that patriarchate is doing in local economies, particularly in places like Africa. And so recognizing the role of economic incentives, to put it in polite terms, that are used in order to build influence, and think about how to seed those local economies in ways that allow them to resist.
Right. I believe I would say this. Putinism is not a glitch of the Russian history, of the system. It's a feature. How to remove this feature? How to achieve this apoputinopoiesis? Remember this Greek word. Deputinization. I would use two other Greek words as a kind of remedy to deal with Putinism. One is catharsis. You will probably recognize this word, right? Catharsis. Catharsis through delivering justice, through serving justice. Without justice, without serving justice, the catharsis is impossible. Without catharsis, peace is impossible. If there is no justice, there will be more wars, there will be more violence. First thing, first Greek word, catharsis. Another word is it's a combination, metathesis to nou, or briefly metanoia. Metanoia means repentance. It's a religious term. We as religious people understand what it means, and it must be applied to the Russian psyche, to heal it. The change of mind. Metathesis to nou is a much more complex phenomenon. It means like really removing the mind from one setting and placing it to another setting. So this Russian mind, Russian psyche needs to be helped to change completely. Without this change, there will be more wars, repeated aggression, and so forth. So 3 words. To achieve apoputinopoiesis, we need catharsis and metanoia, or repentance. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as everyone is doing publicity with their reports, I would also like to present the report of my friends from the Free Russia Foundation, who are present here, which is called the Russian Orthodox Church and the War, which can be downloaded directly from the website. Well, I would say a few things. If you, when you spoke about interaction, if you consider interaction with what we may identify as Russian resistance, I would say that there are 2 words, knowledge and communication. You have to know what is happening, and you have to identify the people that you want to communicate with. And I think this moral and theological failure of the Moscow Patriarchate is in fact something much broader. It's also a failure of the global Orthodox community to respond to it, and in a way of a global Christian community. Because really, the presence of the Moscow Patriarchate in the World Council of Churches, for example, is kind of as normal. So recently, the Council of European Churches made a declaration in which these beliefs, some of which we're discussing today, and their consequences are actually identified as heresy. So I think that we're speaking not only about failure of one institution to which we have to respond, but as to a more global task and on a global level of the global Christian community. Thank you.
Якщо казати, які би я могла бачити поради в цій ситуації, то перше – це покарання за ті злочини, які путінська церква робить відносно моїх співгромадян в окупації.
Speaking of what kind of advice or recommendation I can make is, number one, I think it's important to bring to justice those criminals who commit crimes against my fellow citizens and people of faith in Ukraine.
Друге – це супротив через протидію мілітаризації молоді з безпосередньої участі церкви.
Number two is counteraction and resistance to those efforts to militarize the minds of young people where church is involved and takes part.
І ця низка злочинів має бути не те, що засуджена або викликати занепокоєння.
This chain of crimes needs to be addressed not just with words of concern.
Ми всі повинні розуміти, що там, де є виключний доступ до людей в окупації і фактично монополія впливу церкви на вірян, вони всі є мішенню і об'єктом впливу Російської Федерації з її хворобливими наративом.
We need to understand that where a Russian Orthodox Church has this monopolistic, exclusive access to the minds of people of faith, they become victims of that brainwash.
You're all doing very well, by the way. You've been over, but I'll allow it.
I'm a pastor, so let me start from the Bible. Bible says, if you see somebody making crime, tell him about that. And if it doesn't repent, no catharsis, no metanoia, you need not to eat with them, not to communicate with them, not to trade with them. So first of all, it's sanctions. It's real sanctions, not just maybe in 2030 we are going to do some maybe. So sanction and very close sanction for people. But we're acting not only reactivity but proactivity. We need to raise awareness what happened there. And I'm really glad to see here the team of Faith Under Siege. You are doing proactive things. It's really great to describe what happened there because people don't know. And we need to pay close attention to mass media work because God created the world by word. They created Russian world by word. So we need to punish those who really support all this chewiful ideology which just killed people. And of course we need to support the victims, we need to support organization who is working because we need to work, we need to bring one page of what happened. All like secular or religious and victims, Russians. We need to draw one picture in order all the world understand that what really happened, in order not to be deceived by propaganda or one well-paid man from somewhere. And I know it's not, no, he's not here. But, you know, it's not like a United Nations initiative. No, it's initiative of spirit of justice, spirits of freedom, which can inspire each of us just to be together and just to make one sound, one voice.
I have mine. Just quickly, I think that the proper strategy for now would be disengagement with the official church authorities. I don't think that it's a secret in this room that Russian authorities, including church authorities, are investing heavily into infiltrating into American political circles, and basically they want to start this conversation with American politicians speaking about the suppression of religious freedoms in Ukraine. But it's vice versa. It's actually in Russia that these freedoms are being suppressed. And I would refer here to Russian writer, a famous Russian writer, Mikhail Lermontov, in his Hero of Our Time. He has this piercing insight where he says that understanding the evil is halfway to accepting the evil. To rephrase that, I think that starting conversation with those who violate human rights, including religious freedoms, is halfway to kind of accepting that they are bringing half-truth, or at least some truth to the discussion, but they are not. And I think that that's a very important thing that we should always remember, that the official Russian church compromised itself fully, and the engagement with it wouldn't bring any insights to how deal with the conflict that we are facing now in Ukraine.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our hour and a half together. Thank you all for your attention. Candidly, I could sit here and ask them questions for hours. I think we have brilliant people here who have done amazing work. And again, whether it's in Ukraine or these Russian-occupied territories, I've seen the importance of the work to document in Iraq. And so, Dr. Yastrebova, I just again want to thank you for the work that you do and how incredibly vital that is for the historical record to be there. So God bless you in that work, and again, thank you to Ned.
Sarah, can I say something just real quick?
Yeah.
So, Faith Under Siege, we just got polling back that shows that our movie has been seen by 3 million American voters, and so it's having a real impact. And we could not have done it without the people on this stage, and so
I wish we had time for questions. We're at our time, but again, thank you all for your time, your intellect, and sharing it with these folks. Please check out the reports that they mentioned. If you have any questions, I'm sure that they would love to answer them and find ways to engage with you. So thank you again so very much all for your attention today, and thank you to Ned.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Father.